Jake Martinez stood at the main window of Earth Defense Station, watching the enemy ships fill the darkness of space like angry metal stars. 300 alien vessels hung there in perfect formation, waiting for his answer to their demand. The message had been simple and cruel. Surrender your planet, or we will destroy every living thing on it. Jake counted the ships again, hoping he had made a mistake, but the number stayed the same. 300 ships against Earth's tiny fleet of 30 vessels, and most of those were just cargo ships with guns bolted onto them. Amy Carter ran into the command room holding a datapad and breathing hard. Her face was white with fear, and Jake could see the worry in her eyes. She had been monitoring alien communications for the past 6 hours since the fleet arrived, and none of the news was good. The aliens called themselves the Zarian Collective, and they had a terrible reputation across the galaxy. 12 planets had already fallen to these same ships, and not one of those worlds had survived the attack. Amy handed Jake the datapad and spoke in a quiet voice. The Zarians were not interested in talking or making deals. They wanted complete surrender, or they would start shooting. Intelligence reports from other star systems showed that these aliens kept their promises about destruction. When they said they would wipe out a planet, they meant every word. The burned remains of those 12 worlds proved that the Zarians did not make empty threats. Jake looked at the tactical display showing Earth's pathetic defenses and felt anger building in his chest. Humanity had worked so hard to reach the stars and build homes on other worlds, but they were still new to space compared to older alien races. Earth's weapons were simple and weak. Their ships were slow and clumsy against a real military force. Like the Zarian fleet, they would last maybe 10 minutes in a fight. The alien commander had given them exactly 1 day to decide, 24 hours to choose between slavery and death. Jake had spent most of that time trying to think of a third option, but nothing came to mind. Earth could not fight and Earth could not run. The planet held billions of people who had nowhere else to go. Even if they had enough ships to evacuate everyone, the Zarians would just follow and destroy the refugee fleet. Army was still standing there waiting for orders, and Jake could see that she expected him to contact Earth's government and arrange the surrender. That was the smart thing to do. That was the only logical choice when facing impossible odds. But Jake had always been the kind of person who hated giving up even when winning seemed impossible. His mind kept working on the problem like a dog chewing on a bone. The communication board started flashing with incoming messages from the Zarian fleet. Their commander wanted an answer, and he was getting impatient. Jake walked over to the comm station and stared at the controls. He could open a channel right now and tell them that Earth surrendered. He could save billions of lives by giving the aliens what they wanted. But something in his gut told him to wait just a little longer. That was when the crazy idea hit him like lightning. Jake turned away from the comm station and started pacing around the room while his brain worked on the details. The aliens did not know much about human technology. They had never fought humans before. They had no idea what Earth's real military capabilities looked like. What if he could make them think that humanity was much stronger than it actually appeared? Jake stopped pacing and looked at Amy with a strange smile on his face. She stared back at him with confusion because she had never seen that particular expression before. It was the look of a man who had just thought of something either very brilliant or very stupid. Jake called over to the communications officer and told him to get Ben Parker up to the command center right away. Ben was their best expert on radio equipment and voice systems. Amy asked what he was planning, but Jake just shook his head and told her to wait. He needed Ben's skills for what he had in mind. The plan forming in his head was completely insane and would probably get them all killed. But it was better than just giving up without a fight. If the Zarians thought they were facing a helpless planet, then Jake would show them something different. He would make them believe that Earth had the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Ben Parker arrived a few minutes later, carrying a toolbox full of electronic equipment. He was a thin man with clever eyes who could make any machine do exactly what he wanted. Jake explained his idea and watched Ben's face change from confusion to understanding to excitement. Ben grinned and nodded his head. He said it was crazy, enough that it might actually work. Jake looked out at the alien fleet one more time and took a deep breath. In a few hours they would either be dead or they would have pulled off the greatest trick in human history. Ben Parker spread his equipment across 3 tables in the communications room while Jake explained the details of his desperate plan. They were going to create the biggest lie in human history by making the Zarian fleet believe that Earth had hundreds of powerful warships hidden throughout the solar system. Ben listened carefully and started connecting wires and adjusting frequencies on his machines. his eyes lit up with the challenge of fooling an entire alien fleet using nothing but radio tricks and clever programming. The plan was simple in concept but would require perfect execution. Every human facility in the solar system would become part of a fake armada. Mining stations would pretend to be battleships. Research probes would act like destroyers. Even the old weather satellites would be given new identities as stealth fighters. Ben would create fake radio chatter between these phantom ships, while his equipment generated false sensor readings that would show up on alien detection systems. Jake called Captain Lisa Wong from Intelligence and told her to contact every human outpost in the solar system. He needed complete cooperation from asteroid miners, research teams, and even the tourist station orbiting Venus. Everyone would have to follow precise instructions about what signals to broadcast and when to move their vessels. Lisa looked skeptical about the plan, but she started making calls anyway because there were no other options left. Ben worked for 3 hours straight, setting up his equipment, while Amy coordinated with facilities across the solar system. The mining station near Jupiter agreed to pretend they were a heavy cruiser. The research base on one of Saturn's moons would become a carrier ship full of fighters. Even the small probe studying comets in the outer system got a new role as a long-range scout vessel. Each facility received specific instructions about radio frequencies and movement patterns. The genius of Jake's plan was that the aliens had never encountered human technology before, so they had no way to know what real human warships should look like on their sensors. Ben could make a simple mining laser appear to be a massive weapon system. He could take the radio signature of a cargo hauler and turn it into the profile of a dreadnought battleship. The Xerians would see exactly what Ben wanted them to see. As the sun set over Earth's main continent, Jake stood in the command center, watching his team put the final touches on their deception. Ben had created an entire fleet of ghost ships, complete with individual call signs and command structures. He had even programmed fake engine signatures and weapon systems for each phantom vessel. Amy had prepared a list of human facilities that would participate in the hoax and their new military identities. The moment of truth arrived. When Jake decided it was time to contact the alien fleet, he walked over to the main communications panel and opened a channel to the Xerian command ship. His voice was calm and confident as he spoke, even though his heart was beating like a drum. Jake identified himself as Admiral Samuel Brooks of the Terran Star Command and informed the aliens that they had entered human space without permission. The alien commander sounded surprised to hear from someone claiming to be an admiral. The Xerians had been watching Earth for weeks, and their intelligence suggested that humans had only a small defensive force. Jake smiled as he delivered his next line about Earth's defensive fleet moving into position around the solar system. He could almost hear the confusion in the aliens' voice as they tried to figure out where these human ships had come from. Ben started broadcasting fake military communications on frequencies he knew the aliens were monitoring. Phantom ship captains reported their positions and weapon status. Ghost squadrons acknowledged orders and confirmed their readiness for combat. The radio chatter sounded completely authentic because Ben had studied recordings of real Earth military communications and copied their patterns and terminology perfectly. Amy monitored the alien fleet's movements and reported that they were starting to spread out and run deeper sensor scans. The Xerians were clearly trying to locate the human ships they were hearing on the radio. Jake felt a moment of panic, wondering if their trick would be discovered immediately, but Ben assured him that his false signals would hold up under normal scanning. The aliens would see exactly what they expected to see. The first test came when a Xerian scout ship moved closer to Jupiter to investigate the mining station there. Ben quickly activated the false battleship profile and started broadcasting heavy weapon signatures from that location. The mining station's industrial lasers suddenly appeared on alien sensors as massive plasma cannons capable of destroying entire fleets. The scout ship immediately backed away and reported to its command vessel about the powerful human warship guarding Jupiter space. Jake watched the tactical display as more alien ships began moving around the solar system, trying to get better readings on the phantom human fleet. Each time they approached one of his fake warships, Ben would activate the appropriate false signals and make them think they were facing impossible firepower. The asteroid belt became a fortress full of hidden destroyers. The space around Mars transformed into a carrier group ready to launch fighters. Hour by hour, the deception grew more elaborate as Ben added new details to his phantom fleet. He created fake supply convoys moving between the ghost ships. He invented maintenance schedules and patrol routes. He even programmed simulated damage reports and repair operations to make everything seem more realistic. The aliens were getting a complete picture of a massive human military force that existed only in Ben's imagination and Jake's desperate hope for survival. Warlord Zektar stood in the command center of his flagship staring at sensor displays that made no sense. When his fleet had first arrived at this human world, the scans had shown a weak civilization with primitive defenses. Now his instruments were detecting powerful warships throughout the entire solar system. The humans seemed to have materialized an entire armada out of empty space, and Zektar could not understand how they had accomplished such a feat. His sensor operator was a nervous, young Zarian who kept recalibrating his equipment, hoping the readings would change. The officer reported that human ships were appearing everywhere his scanners looked. At least 500 vessels of various sizes were now visible on the displays, and more signatures kept appearing as his instruments penetrated deeper into the system. Some of these ships were showing energy outputs that exceeded anything in the Zarian database. Zektar had conquered 12 worlds using the same basic strategy. His fleet would arrive in overwhelming numbers and demand immediate surrender. Most civilizations took one look at 300 Zarian warships and gave up without a fight. The few species that tried to resist were quickly crushed by superior firepower and tactics. But Earth was presenting him with a situation he had never encountered before. On Earth, Jake watched the alien fleet spreading out across the solar system and knew his plan was working. The Zarians were clearly confused by what their sensors were telling them. Amy reported that alien communication traffic had increased dramatically as ship commanders tried to understand what they were facing. The enemy was starting to doubt their original assessment of human military capabilities. Jake decided it was time for the next phase of his deception. He contacted Colonel Rick Davis, who was in charge of Earth's engineering corps, and explained what he needed. Rick controlled several automated mining operations in the asteroid belt, and Jake wanted to use those facilities for a special demonstration. Rick listened to the plan and agreed it was completely insane, but he started preparing the explosives anyway. The idea was to make the aliens think they were witnessing human weapons in action. Rick had placed small charges on several large asteroids and would detonate them in a specific sequence. When viewed from a distance, the explosions would look exactly like the results of massive energy weapon strikes. The debris patterns and radiation signatures would match what the aliens expected to see from advanced military technology. Ben prepared a special radio broadcast that would coincide with the demonstration. He would pretend to be giving orders to a phantom squadron of human battleships positioning for a practice firing exercise. The aliens would hear him coordinating target assignments and weapons solutions for ships that existed only in their imagination. When the explosions started, they would naturally assume that invisible human vessels were responsible. Amy coordinated the timing with facilities throughout the solar system. Several mining stations would adjust their positions to create the illusion of a fleet formation. The research probe near Saturn would broadcast false engine signatures suggesting rapid acceleration. Even the orbital platform around Earth would modify its power output to mimic a command ship coordinating the exercise. At exactly 1500 hours ship time, Ben opened communications on a frequency he knew the aliens were monitoring. His voice was calm and professional as he addressed the Phantom Squadron Alpha, and ordered them to demonstrate their weapons systems. He specified target coordinates in the asteroid belt and authorized maximum yield energy discharge. The fake military terminology sounded completely authentic because Ben had spent hours studying real combat manuals. Rick triggered the first series of explosions and the asteroid belt lit up with brilliant flashes of light. Chunks of rock and metal scattered in perfect patterns that matched computer simulations of plasma weapon impacts. The energy release was visible across the entire inner solar system and registered on every sensor system in the area. To anyone watching, it looked like devastating firepower had just been unleashed by an invisible fleet. Zektar watched the demonstration with growing alarm. His tactical officers confirmed that the explosion patterns were consistent with directed energy weapons far more powerful than anything his own fleet carried. The human ships responsible for the attack remained completely invisible to his sensors, which suggested stealth technology beyond Zarian understanding. His advantages in numbers and firepower were starting to look meaningless against an enemy that could strike without being detected. Ben continued his fake radio chatter as if the weapons demonstration was just routine training. He complimented the Phantom Squadron on their accuracy and ordered them to maintain their positions while targeting data was analyzed. The casual tone of his voice suggested that this kind of overwhelming firepower was normal for human military forces. He even complained about minor targeting errors, as if vaporizing asteroids was something his ships did every day. The psychological effect on the Zerian fleet was immediate and profound. Ship commanders started requesting permission to withdraw to safer distances. Scanner operators reported that they were detecting even more human vessels now that the fleet had revealed its presence. What had started as a simple planetary conquest was turning into a nightmare scenario, where the hunters had become the hunted. Jake felt a moment of satisfaction as he watched alien ships pulling back from the asteroid belt. His crazy plan was actually working. The Zerians were starting to believe they had stumbled into a trap set by a technologically superior enemy. But he knew the deception was still fragile, and one mistake could expose the truth. Ben would have to keep broadcasting fake signals, and Rick would need to prepare more demonstrations if they wanted to maintain the illusion of overwhelming human military superiority. Zektar called an emergency meeting of his senior commanders in the main briefing room of his flagship. The holographic displays showed the mysterious human fleet that had appeared throughout the solar system, along with recorded footage of their devastating weapons demonstration. His officers sat in uncomfortable silence as they studied the tactical situation that had gone from simple to impossible in just a few hours. Sub-Commander Valinix was the first to speak, and her voice carried the worry that everyone in the room was feeling. She pointed out that the Zerian collective had never encountered a species with this level of military sophistication. The humans had somehow concealed an enormous fleet until the moment of contact, and their stealth technology was unlike anything in the known galaxy. The weapons demonstration had shown firepower that could destroy the entire Zerian force. Zektar listened to his officers debate their options while studying the sensor data from the asteroid belt explosions. The energy signatures were consistent with plasma weapons, but the power levels were off the scale. His own fleet carried similar technology, but nothing that could produce such massive destruction. The humans appeared to have developed military science far beyond what their primitive world should have been capable of achieving. On Earth, Jake was pushing his deception into new territory with the help of Captain Helen Stone, who commanded Earth's fastest scout ship. Helen was a pilot with nerves of steel and reflexes like a cat who had volunteered for the most dangerous part of the plan. Jake needed her to fly past the alien fleet while her ship's transponder broadcast the false signature of a massive dreadnought battleship. Ben had programmed the fake signal to make Helen's tiny scout vessel appear as large as a city on alien sensors. The energy readings would suggest engines powerful enough to move a ship weighing millions of tons at impossible speeds. When the aliens saw this phantom dreadnought racing through their formation, they would naturally assume that human technology was far beyond their own capabilities. Helen climbed into her ship, while Ben made final adjustments to the transponder system. The scout vessel was barely large enough for one person and carried no weapons except for a single emergency laser. But when Ben activated his modifications, the ship would appear on Zerian sensors as the most powerful warship they had ever encountered. Helen would have to fly directly through the enemy formation at maximum speed to sell the illusion. Jake opened a communication channel and spoke in his fake Edmore voice as Helen's ship approached the alien fleet. He identified the vessel as Dreadnought Terra Nova on routine patrol duty and warned the Zerians to maintain safe distance from human military operations. His casual tone suggested that ships this powerful were common in the Earth Defense Force and that the aliens were lucky to witness such advanced technology. Helen hit the engines and her scout ship shot through the Zerian formation like a bullet. The aliens detected what appeared to be a massive battleship moving at speeds that should have been physically impossible. Their own dreadnoughts were huge lumbering vessels that needed hours to change course, but this human ship moved like a fighter while carrying the signature of a planet killer. The implications for human military science were terrifying. Ben continued broadcasting fake radio traffic between phantom ships throughout the solar system. Mining stations began coordinated movements that created the illusion of battle groups maneuvering into attack formations. The research probe near Jupiter changed course in a pattern that suggested a carrier launching fighter squadrons. Even the tiny maintenance drones orbiting Earth modified their flight paths to mimic escort vessels, protecting important installations. The psychological warfare was working perfectly as Zerian ship commanders reported increasing numbers of human vessels appearing on their screens. What had started as isolated contacts was becoming a comprehensive picture of military forces beyond their ability to fight. The aliens were starting to believe they had walked into a carefully prepared trap set by strategists who understood war better than they did. Jake watched the enemy fleet's movements and saw exactly what he had hoped to see. The Xerians were pulling back from aggressive positions and forming defensive formations. Their behavior showed fear and uncertainty instead of the confidence they had displayed when first arriving at Earth. The hunters were becoming the hunted as they realized they might be facing an enemy they could not defeat. Amy reported that alien communication traffic was showing signs of panic as ship commanders requested new orders from their leadership. The Xerians had built their reputation on overwhelming force and sudden strikes, but now they were facing an opponent who seemed to have anticipated their every move. Their simple conquest was turning into a complex military puzzle they did not know how to solve. Ben activated the final phase of his radio deception by broadcasting what sounded like preparations for a massive human counterattack. Phantom Squadron leaders reported weapons charged and targeting solutions locked on alien vessels. Ghost ship captains acknowledged orders to engage enemy forces on command. The fake military chatter painted a picture of hundreds of invisible human warships ready to unleash devastating firepower at a moment's notice. Zector received reports from his scouts that human ships were maneuvering throughout the solar system in preparation for battle. His tactical computers estimated that the enemy force outnumbered his fleet by at least 2-to-1 and possessed technology decades ahead of Xerian science. The simple planetary conquest he had planned was becoming a potential disaster that could result in the destruction of his entire armada. The warlord found himself facing a decision that would determine the fate of both fleets. He could order an attack and hope that Xerian numbers and experience would overcome human technology, or he could admit that his intelligence had been wrong and that Earth was protected by forces beyond his ability to challenge. Either choice would have consequences that reached far beyond this single star system. Warlord Zector stood alone in his private chamber, staring out at the stars while his mind wrestled with an impossible decision. His entire military career had been built on careful planning and overwhelming force, but now he faced an enemy that seemed to have anticipated his every move. The humans had revealed military capabilities that made his powerful fleet look like primitive toys. Every instinct told him to retreat, but admitting defeat would destroy his reputation throughout the galaxy. His tactical officer entered the chamber with another report about human fleet movements. The aliens were detecting new ship signatures every hour as more phantom vessels appeared on their sensors. The estimated enemy force had grown to over 800 ships of various classes, including several super dreadnoughts that showed energy readings beyond anything in Xerian experience. The humans appeared to have built the most powerful military force in known space. Jake decided it was time for direct communication with the alien commander. He had Ben modify his voice to sound older and more authoritative before opening a channel to the Xerian flagship. Jake introduced himself as Admiral Samuel Brooks and complimented Zector on his impressive reputation. 12 worlds had fallen to the warlord's fleet, which showed both skill and determination. But now the Xerians faced humanity, and humans were different from other species. Zector listened to the human admiral's words and heard confidence backed by overwhelming power. The voice carried the calm certainty of someone who held all the advantages in the coming battle. The human spoke of mutual respect between warriors and offered the Xerian fleet a choice between honorable withdrawal and complete destruction. There was no anger or hatred in his tone, just professional recognition of military realities. Ben continued broadcasting fake communications between phantom human ships while Jake talked to the alien commander. Reports of quantum torpedo and gravitational lance arrays filled the radio spectrum. Ghost ship captains acknowledged orders to charge exotic weapon systems that existed only in science fiction novels. The technical terminology sounded authentic because Ben had researched every advanced physics concept he could find in Earth's databases. The final element of Jake's psychological warfare came when Amy activated emergency beacons at every human facility throughout the solar system. Mining stations, research bases, orbital platforms, and even tiny maintenance drones suddenly began broadcasting high-energy signatures that suggested massive power systems coming online. To the aliens it looked like thousands of hidden installations were preparing for combat operations. Zector watched his sensor displays fill with new contacts as the human star system revealed its true military nature. What had appeared to be a peaceful collection of civilian facilities was actually a fortress designed to trap unwary invaders. Every asteroid, every moon, every orbital platform was apparently armed and ready for war. The humans had turned their entire solar system into an integrated defense network. Jake pressed his advantage by describing the history of human warfare and their reputation for never surrendering. He mentioned that no alien fleet had ever successfully invaded the Sol system. Though many had tried, the bones of previous invaders were scattered throughout the asteroid belt as a warning to others who might threaten Earth. His words painted a picture of humanity as the galaxy's most dangerous military power. The psychological pressure on Zek was becoming unbearable as he realized the scope of the trap he had walked into. His intelligence reports had described Earth as a weak target suitable for easy conquest. Instead, he had found a sophisticated enemy that had been waiting for him. With overwhelming force and advanced technology, the humans had allowed him to enter their system, just so they could demonstrate their superiority. Ben added the finishing touch to his deception by broadcasting what sounded like final preparations for a human assault. Phantom Fleet commanders reported all weapons charged and targeting solutions locked onto Zerian vessels. Ghost squadrons acknowledged orders to engage the enemy and began moving into attack positions. The fake radio chatter suggested that hundreds of invisible ships were about to unleash devastating firepower. Amy monitored alien communications and reported that panic was spreading through the Zarian fleet. Ship commanders were requesting immediate evacuation, while sensor operators reported being overwhelmed by the number of human contacts appearing on their screens. The aliens had lost all confidence in their ability to win the battle and were preparing for the worst defeat in their military history. Jake knew this was the critical moment when his entire plan would either succeed or fail catastrophically. He gave Zector exactly 1 hour to make his decision about withdrawal or destruction. The time limit created additional pressure while suggesting that human patience was limited. Jake spoke like a commander who was doing the aliens a favor by offering them any choice at all. Zector found himself trapped between impossible options as he considered his response to the human ultimatum. He could order an attack against an enemy that appeared to outnumber and outgun his forces by a massive margin, or he could accept the offered withdrawal and preserve his fleet for future battles against more reasonable opponents. Both choices would have consequences, but only one would allow his ships and crews to survive. The warlord called his senior officers together for one final meeting to discuss their situation. The holographic displays showed a human fleet that dominated the entire solar system with firepower beyond Zarian ability to match. His own 300 ships looked pathetically small compared to the armada that surrounded them. Every tactical analysis suggested that attacking would result in complete annihilation. As the hour deadline approached, Zector made the hardest decision of his military career. He would accept the human offer of withdrawal and live to fight another day. The Zerian collective would have to find easier targets for conquest because Earth was clearly beyond their ability to challenge. Sometimes even the greatest warriors had to admit when they were outmatched by a superior enemy. 53 minutes after Jake's ultimatum expired, the Zerian fleet began withdrawing from Earth space in organized formations that showed both discipline and defeat. Warlord Zectar's final transmission was brief and filled with the kind of respect that one warrior shows to another after recognizing superior skill. He acknowledged human sovereignty over the Sol system and promised that the Zerian collective would not return. The admission of defeat from such a powerful enemy sent shockwaves through the command center. Jake collapsed into his chair as the alien ships disappeared into hyperspace, leaving behind empty space, where moments before an invasion fleet had threatened all human life. The weight of what they had accomplished hit him like a physical blow. 300 enemy warships had retreated without firing a single shot because they believed Earth possessed military forces that existed only in Ben's imagination and Jake's desperate hope for survival. Amy stared at the tactical display showing the last Zerian vessel vanishing from sensor range and shook her head in amazement. She had watched the entire deception unfold over the past day but still could not quite believe it had actually worked. A handful of humans using mining equipment and radio tricks had convinced a galactic superpower to abandon their conquest plans. The greatest military victory in human history had been won without any real weapons. Ben started shutting down his Phantom Fleet signals one by one as the communications equipment returned to normal operations. The ghost ships that had terrified an entire alien armada faded back into the civilian facilities they had always been. Mining stations resumed their normal work schedules. Research probes continued their scientific missions. The orbital platforms around Earth went back to monitoring weather and communications traffic. Captain Helen Stone's voice crackled over the comm system as she returned from her high-speed run through the enemy formation. Her tiny scout ship had convinced the aliens they were facing battleships capable of impossible performance. Helen asked if they had really just made a galactic military force retreat using nothing but creative storytelling and basic physics. Jake confirmed that they had indeed pulled off the most successful deception in human history. Lisa Wong contacted the command center from intelligence headquarters with reports that were already coming in from deep space monitoring stations. Word of Earth's Phantom Fleet was spreading through alien communication networks faster than light travel. The story was growing with each retelling as species throughout the galaxy heard about humanity's impossible military technology and devastating defensive capabilities. Jake realized that their hoax was becoming something much more powerful than a simple trick. The galaxy now believed that Earth was protected by an invincible armada equipped with weapons beyond current scientific understanding. No alien force would dare attack a world defended by ships that could appear and disappear at will while unleashing planet-killing firepower. Fear and reputation had become humanity's greatest shields. Amy reported that Zarian military broadcasts were describing the encounter with human forces in terms that made Earth sound like the most dangerous world in the galaxy. The aliens spoke of stealth technology that made entire fleets invisible, weapons that could vaporize asteroids from impossible distances, and strategic planning that had anticipated every move of their invasion force. The truth was far less impressive, but the legend would protect humanity for generations. Ben discovered that his fake radio transmissions had been recorded by alien listening posts throughout the region. The phantom military communications were being analyzed by enemy intelligence services trying to understand human tactical doctrine and weapons technology. Every casual reference to quantum torpedoes and gravitational weapons was being taken seriously by species that had never imagined such advanced science. Rick Davis contacted the command center from his engineering station with news that mining companies throughout the asteroid belt were reporting visits from alien scout ships. The scouts would approach human facilities expecting to find hidden military bases, but would detect only the false signatures that Ben's equipment continued to broadcast. Each investigation added more evidence to support the legend of Earth's Phantom Armada. Jake looked out at the stars, knowing that humanity had bought itself time and space to grow stronger. The galaxy now saw Earth as a military power to be respected rather than a primitive world suitable for conquest. Other species would approach humans with caution and offer cooperation instead of threats. The Phantom Fleet had become real in the most important way possible by changing how the galaxy viewed humanity. 3 months later, alien probe ships would occasionally test the edges of the solar system, hoping to learn more about human military capabilities. Each time they detected the same mysterious energy signatures and impossible weapon readings that Ben had programmed into his equipment. The probes would retreat and file reports about Earth's continuing military buildup, even though nothing had actually changed except the stories they told themselves. The hoax had taken on a life of its own as more alien species heard about the humans who had made a Zarian fleet retreat without firing a shot. Some stories claimed that Earth was protected by thousands of invisible ships. Others suggested that humans had developed time travel technology or weapons that could destroy entire star systems. Every version of the tale made humanity sound more dangerous than the last. Jake often stood at the command center window, looking out at space and thinking about the power of imagination. The greatest victory in human history had been won not with guns or bombs, but with the oldest human talent of all, which was the ability to tell a convincing story when survival depended on it. The galaxy was full of species with advanced technology and powerful weapons, but only humans had learned to weaponize their own creativity. Years would pass before any alien force would dare to approach Earth again, and by then humanity would have had time to build real defenses to match their legendary reputation. The Phantom Fleet that had never existed would become the foundation for actual military power that could protect human colonies throughout the galaxy. Sometimes the greatest lies become the most important truths when they inspire people to make them real.